So hello everybody, my name is Ben from Drunken Buddha. Welcome. I am here today with Prajna O'Hara. Very pleased to be with her. It's a good friend of mine. And we're going to talk today about how to use plant medicine to safely heal trauma and addiction. So these are all topics that are close to my heart. You know, I'm a recovered addict. I've worked with plant medicine as part of my own recovery. And as I'll explain shortly, I've worked with Prajna as well. And today we're going to be diving into this topic a little bit more deeply. So talking about what kind of plants we're talking about when it comes to plant medicine. Why are they medicines? Like, how do they work? How do they heal trauma? How can we relate to them and weave them into our own healing journeys? How do they relate to addictions? What are the traps? Some of the dangers? Then maybe if we have time, getting into some of the stuff around a more how do they relate to a more feminine, earth-based, more connected human spirituality? And how does it relate to maybe perhaps a wider, more collective view of healing as well? So Prajna is a medicine woman who runs plant medicine retreats, a proud mother, a Hakomi therapist, and a soul guide. And I've been on multiple retreats with Prajna. When I initially scoped out, I was sort of wondering about psychedelics and plant medicine, and I got in touch with someone who I was just talking to, and they recommended Prajna to me, and I don't regret it at all. In fact, as I look back on some of my early experiences with you, I see more and more all the things you were doing, how much skill and capacity and integrity it takes to hold space for so many people in retreats when they're undergoing their process. So it's awesome stuff. So I'd love to hand over to you now to talk about a bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and your relationship with the plants.
Thank you, Ben. Well, it's really great to see you. Thanks for inviting me excuse me, into this conversation. It's a really important conversation, something I have a lot of passion about, and to see how we're going to put all of that into a conversation for about an hour and 15 minutes, whatever. That's going to be tricky. So maybe I should begin with saying I've been working with plant medicine for quite some time. And I initially came to plant medicine through a friend who suggested that it might help me with my own trauma at the time. And that particular trauma was from having a medicalized trauma. The birth of my daughters, they were 3 months early, and they were born by an unnecessary C-section, which opened up my womb and left a pretty good scar, and also disconnected me from the base of my body. I really kind of couldn't find my legs for quite some time. So my initial introduction to plant medicine was not only healing the scar tissue, which is gone amazingly, but also bringing me into my legs. And I had chronic fatigue at the time from being this full-on mom, handling some pretty extreme medical trauma in myself that I wasn't really even aware of, but mostly in my daughters, and not getting sleep and all those kinds of things. It was really intense. And so the first thing that happened was this uncovering of fatigue. And I know, so we can just speak about, well, let me just say in the beginning, you said, what plants are we going to speak about?
Yeah.
And I'll say the ones that I feel most qualified to speak about, that I've had extensive training with, is ayahuasca, San Pedro, and tobacco. So there's other things I have experience with, but I don't feel qualified to speak on.
Yeah, sure.
So there's that. So maybe it's been like 15 years or 16, maybe even longer. The pandemic has kind of warped time. And here we are, hopefully coming out of that. And I also have a background in trauma-informed therapy through Hakomi, and also just working with my daughters who had very extreme brain trauma. So in my own work with my daughters and working with different alternative therapists and acupuncture and all kinds of things, I've learned a lot about the necessity of safety and how to create an environment, in your body and in your home, and then again in the ceremony circle where a person feels safe. Because if there isn't safety, that's the most important thing.
Yes.
Then nervous system isn't able to regulate. And trauma is a dysregulated nervous system. And that can be triggered in a lot of different ways, and it can show up with a variety of different symptoms. Often shows up in addiction. So addiction is a symptom of trauma. So often I have found in my own experience, including in myself, is that when a person is going to an extreme in something where there isn't balance, they're attempting to fill a missed experience. Something in the system is yearning to be satiated.
Mhm.
And when something is satiated, it can rest. So we hear that with addicts. You know this in your own process and my own. You can take a particular substance, and it could be work, sex, a drug, whatever it is. There may be a moment of, okay, something has satiated. It's temporary, because it
Yes.
hasn't really healed the root of
Yes,
the.
it's like prosthetic safety. Like a
Mhm, yeah. So I've noticed a lot of that over 40 years of working with people in a lot of different environments, in prisons with women, in homeless shelters, in care homes for girls. So I've worked in a lot of different capacities prior to becoming a mom, but I really feel my work as a mother and then working with plant medicine and with people on retreat is my passion, and it's where I've been able to all of my skills have been able to come forward. And there's something really key about all of that is I've had extensive training doing different plant dietas. So you asked about, how do the plants work, right? Well,
yeah.
there'll be, yeah. So plants, this is it's not my tradition. So first of all, I want to give great honor to my teachers who are from different indigenous traditions. And for them, this is their way of life. It's their healthcare system. It's like they are born into this tradition as a way of life. And they share that with us. So I'm want to stay in right relationship with that. And I give great respect
Mm.
to that particular, to whatever the tradition is.
Yes.
So I have one particular teacher who's Ernesto Garcia Torres, and he will even say that most people aren't even ready for ayahuasca. That it is such a powerful medicine. I mean, it really can. It works very strongly. So working with Ernesto, the very first plant that you work with is tobacco, because
Okay.
tobacco, well, for a lot of different reasons, it doesn't have DMT in it, so it isn't a hallucinogenic. But tobacco is what gives us grounding and protection, and it's the master teacher plant of all the other plants. So it really guides the work. And it's also not an easy medicine.
Yeah,
You know,
I've experienced that myself. Yeah.
but it's the foundation, and it's what really anchors us in our bodies and our feet and our connection to the earth. And that's really essential in order to understand the power of the tradition and the plants, and to be able to navigate, if you're going to work with hallucinogenics or DMT, to navigate different realms. So a person has to really be well trained in that, because many things can go off, can go wrong if that isn't the case.
Yeah, so the tobacco is, it sort of lays the foundation, lays some of the groundwork for not just being completely in your head and disembodied, because it's that's not a particularly stable place to go into some of the more like you say, some of the strong, intense ayahuasca experiences, sort of bringing you back down to the basics, back down to earth, to the body.
Yeah. And you could say similar in the way that certain spiritualities, certain traditions, in the way that they get interpreted and practiced, is more of a bypass, can be a
Yeah.
transcendence of a moving up and out. And with ayahuasca, one thing that's really wonderful about it is you can't bypass anything. So it's really a coming down and in. But because of that, and so much is unpacked in the process, you need someone facilitating the circle that is so strongly present that there isn't going to be any you know people. It's easy enough to have too much and kind of check out, and then healing doesn't happen when there's checking out.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's exactly maintaining that presence, which is sort of synonymous with that grounding you were talking about with tobacco.
Hmm.
So this is really interesting. So just kind of recap your experience. You have so many different experiences of this, your own trauma of the birth of your daughters, and helping them develop their work with their own over 2.5 decades now, prisons, homeless shelters, and with all the people you've seen on your retreats. Quite an amazing sort of bag of experience you've got there. So we started talking about how tobacco works, that grounding effect. I'm really curious to what you would say the process is of how ayahuasca works, because my sort of sense of it is just entirely experiential, just really spontaneous of like what it feels like it does. It's almost like a sort of an intensification of my own consciousness,
Yes,
a
yes.
temporary intensification or acceleration, so that you can sort of layers that are hidden are sort of able to be seen, and sort of it goes down and it kind of goes up. There's almost like a downward part bit into the body and all the things that are hidden there. And then as you go through that's like kind of the first phase. It's more of a cleansing, purifications. You feel this stuff going through. Maybe there's the purging, vomiting, and so forth. And afterwards, the kind of the insights come, or the more somewhat more transcendent experiences that come after the teachings. Sort of there's space left afterwards for sort of insight to come in the more the second half. That's kind of my experience. I'd love to hear your angle as to what the actual, where does it what is the key that fits into that lock? What is the lock?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah. So everybody's experience is different, as and so we can speak about how a person, first of all, what is a person coming to plant medicine for? Like, it's important that a person is called to work with the plants. It's not something that you can get dragged to, kind of in the same way you can't drag somebody to an AA meeting, right? They have to come on their own. They really want the intention for what we're coming for is important, like that intention. What is calling to be healed? What is calling for more clarification? What is wanting to be let go of? What just like having some kind of idea of that, and also knowing who you're going to, what their training is, and
Yeah.
what is the setting. There's something I learned a long time ago. It's the triangle of healing, and it's something that will forever stay with me. I learned this from a neurological acupuncturist, and he always spoke about the every leg of the triangle is essentially important, and if one is weak, then the whole triangle is weak, the triangle of healing. And one part of that is the medicine, the other part is the participant, and the third part is the container, is
Yeah.
the setting, is the environment, is the community. Like, we don't heal in isolation of other people. So to have that kind of community support, and that's something that we can get to, where it's the setting itself, but then afterwards the integration of that. We don't really do any part of it alone. So knowing where the medicine is coming from and who's providing it, like what is their skill level and what is their training, and also what are the questions that they ask, because there are requirements. There are certain things that are contraindicated with ayahuasca because of the DMT. So if you're a person who is prone to suicide, bipolar, very, more of the extreme kinds of mental illnesses, you have to come being somewhat stable.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean already, attended to in all those areas, because that's the reason for coming, but to have some kind of stability, because so much can happen that you need to be able to titrate your experience. We
Yeah.
speak about that a lot in trauma resolution, is things happen in bite-sized pieces for the system to be able to integrate and assimilate and digest. So for a person, if they're already, very challenged in just navigating life and not even sure if they're going to stay in the life, and that's not the person that we want to have in our circle at that time. They may need some other preparations.
Yeah.
There's certain medications that are contraindicated. So these are all important, because if that isn't being asked of a person before they come, you have to wonder about the training of the person and if it's going to be a safe place.
Yeah.
So kind of like get all that out of the way, so then you can show up with a clean diet without a lot of other things in your system, that then the medicine has to work through that. And that's part of the diet, is that the medicine can really go to the work of healing, rather than clearing out the debris of just unnecessary substances that would get in the way of going deep.
Yeah. So you don't spend your ceremony with ayahuasca working on McDonald's rather than
Exactly.
your
Just
important
purging out,
traumas.
purging out lunch. Yeah. Yeah. So like showing up in that kind of way really just lends itself to, significant, important kind of healing experience. And then, so you were asking, how does it work? Well, for everybody, it's different. Like I said, in my initial experience, I was really working through a lot of fatigue, and then opening up certain parts of my body where I wasn't feeling aliveness or energy. So that happens with a lot of people. You can say certain parts have been covered over, whether it be addictive patterns, numbness, checking out, numbness, and it's nothing wrong with that. Those are strategies for how we
Mm.
learn to protect ourselves so that we can do the next thing. And many people kind of exist in a survival kind of mode, but through working with medicine, we're able to get to a place of thriving, feeling very enlivened and safe. And you could say that with trauma, like if there is a goal in trauma or healing, is that sense of feeling I belong to myself, like I belong, I'm here, I have a right to be here, and I'm safe, and my capacity to connect is available to me. So I'm not, so we're coming out of disconnect. Yeah, and I'm belonging to something larger than myself, and I have a sense of wholeness. I know my boundaries, I know what I can say no to, and I know what I can say yes to. And all of this, I mean, I think that working with plant medicine in a responsible way is like having 10 years. You hear this all the time, 10 years of good therapy, even when it's done well, can really, one retreat can feel like years have been taken off your life, literally.
Yeah. And so you're talking of these kind of layers. I always think of it's like almost like wholeness in the center, although it's of course everywhere in a sense, but this true self or authentic self. And then there's these layers of these survival strategies that we take on throughout our lives. The various fight or flight responses, and the numbness and dissociation around it. So is it sort of that if you take part in an ayahuasca ceremony, how does it open up those layers? Does it sort of reveal them in some way? Is it just to bring them up to be felt? So is the participant doing the work there? How does the actual transformation sort of happen?
That's a really good question. And I have to change the light 1 second. All right. So, yes. So, how does it work in these layers? Well, you could say that throughout life we kind of gather different kinds of identities and survival mechanisms and strategies, coping. A lot of times we're just coping. And over time, what I love about ayahuasca, it's almost as if I think of her as a she plant.
Yes.
She awakens you to parts of yourself that you are, that she gives, it's like a capacity to see into the dark. So the ceremony takes place in the dark, and oftentimes we don't it's almost like the capacity to meet fear, those places that we fear,
Mm.
that we have resisted, we have shied away from. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this, but you can kind of say that ayahuasca really accelerates that process, because you're really being held in this safe container, and little by little you can be shown these places that you have suppressed or that are wounded, that have been guarded, and it starts to open up. So this is happening in many ways, like in the mind, where a way of self-referencing yourself, or a way that you've identified yourself to be, or the world to be even. I mean, I remember one time in a ceremony, this was early on, and I was convinced that in that moment, that my computer was being scammed. It was like this really bizarre thing happening right in the ayahuasca ceremony. And I was saying to the facilitator's assistant, like, no, we have to go get my computer from the village. This is like really real. And it just showed me an insecurity. It just showed, this insecurity, and also how how we can take things from the outer world as being literal and real, like
Mm.
instead of either not really happening or pointing to something that we can learn about ourselves in the same way. So she brings insights and teachings that way, which might not be actually literal, but they're showing us something about ourselves, and how our mind is organized, and how we've kind of, like, an identity has been wrapped around this sense, this insecurity or a fear or a mistrust, or an early childhood experience that is resulted in trauma, and that is keeping us a bit undone, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. So this gets opened up, and we also well, ayahuasca is meant to have us purge, right? So a lot of purging happens, and we want purging to happen, and purging can happen in a number of different ways. Unexpressed tears is a big one. Sadness, grief, in our culture, which I think they have more so in different indigenous traditions. We don't necessarily have rites of passage, and
Mhm.
death is a rite of passage, and how that gets celebrated, celebrating a person's life and the tears of that loss. So we don't have those different kinds of things. Or we're going to speak later, but I'll just say in early goddess traditions, there were many more rites of passages where you initiate, and in men's traditions too, to be initiated into manhood, to be initiated into womanhood, and all of these different things, where so much of our culture, and you see it all over, comes out of the early Hebrew tradition. The early patriarchs, the fathers in the Bible, which was the book that everybody went by. But the Hebrew tradition, there was only one covenant, and that covenant that could be created with God. This was when the goddess was suppressed, and the disconnect happened between earth and divinity, body and divinity. So then science took over, and philosophy, and the patriarchs. So the idea then was the only one who could have a covenant, so to speak, with God or spirit was male, and that happened through circumcision. And so if you were a woman, you didn't have a penis, basically. So this is what allowed you to have a relationship with God, was the fact that if you had a penis or not. So women were excluded for centuries and centuries and centuries from this permission, this invitation to commune with the divine. But it was suppressed. It was, it wasn't that it didn't happen before, it did. And some people found other ways to do that. But I say this now because a lot of what happens with plant medicine is this awakening to your plant self, to your plant body, to your connection to earth, to this way of being in life that sees even where the plants come from. This medicine is coming from the earth mother, and from all the different elements that make it possible. And I think this is really important, and maybe why it is arising so strongly right now is that the earth is calling for our attention to be in right relationship with her. And and many people will report that after experiencing plant medicine journeys, that they do feel more in their feet, more connected to the ground, and more in this recognition of the sacredness of the land and of the plants and of the earth and of the beings, and how we can cultivate that, and what a difference that makes. And it's a way of really dismantling patriarchal structures that don't serve anybody. Like, because patriarchy isn't about a gender, although in its original implementation, it did favor men over women as the one to being the Godhead, and then women became ownership, they became property, and children were property. And we kind of have, you probably know, I don't need to go into the whole history of that, but I do have a book coming up, my own book, which speaks more in relationship to all of this and the deconstruction of patriarchal systems, how they harm everybody, and
Yes.
and primarily the earth, right? So plant medicine is I mean, I remember listening to one woman years ago saying, because I had never heard anyone say this, she said, in my very first ayahuasca experience, and she's like this Buddhist nun. And I was like, wow. She goes, I woke up to my plant self. And I was like, that's what happened for me. It's like, I get it. I get that. Like, she said, I'm a plant. I'm a plant. Like, there's so much more going on than this physical form, right? There's like this alive being that's connected to all things.
Yeah. I'd love to, if it's all right, I'd love to jump in here, because I feel it's really important to just to share something, because I think a few years ago, if I'd heard a conversation like this, like 4 or 5 years ago, it'd be like, what are these people talking about? They're clearly a bit insane. Being myself originally in a sort of I'm a rationalist, scientific-minded, atheist sort of dude, right? At the same time, completely dissociated from my body, completely stuck in my head, very arrogant and very scared, actually, and very sad and very angry in really what was going on beneath the surface. I had no idea. And that sort of, when you're talking about patriarchy, it seems to be to come from that place of trying to control everything as a way of suppressing everything inside, which is kind of like a mode of being, a survival mode of being. And it's such a relief to come out of that, actually, as you say. And people in that state are having a bad time, and they're inflicting a bad time on everyone else as a result, and the earth. But it's because the way we deceive ourselves. So it being in that state, you think it's the best possible state to be in. It's rational, it's tell yourselves these things to avoid actually going back into feeling into the body. And I just want to say, it's the journey. Once you start working with medicines, or have some, through whatever inquiry meditation, have some openings to what's the connection between things, start to get into the body, work through some of that stuff, you can have shifts where you see exactly what you're talking about, to see the interconnectedness. I start talking to the plants and the trees, saying good morning to them, because it's like, why would you not? How it was insane. It almost flips around. It's like, how could you think they're not beings? How could you get in such a state that you would think that's insane, that plants are beings, and that you could you're related to them? I just thought I needed to
Exactly.
throw that in
Yeah,
there for
no, really
people who
good.
might doubt.
Really good. And what's important is to, for myself as well, is understanding, because from early childhood trauma, many of us carry shame. Yeah. Boundaries have been broken. It's like, what is trauma? It's something happens to us without our consent, and it shocks us. We're not prepared for it. And it's often done by a person that we trust, so-called supposed to be a trusted adult in early childhood. So many people carry that kind of wounding, which has a like a veil of shame around it, right? And this is kind of perpetuated through patriarchal systems, that are really more focused on gain and on power over, and how can we succeed, and what can I gain, what can I achieve, how can I get more and more and more and more and more, and what else can I appropriate, and for capitalistic gain. And so much of it is done unconsciously. So we need to remember that these patterns of behavior have been existing for thousands of years, and there's been a lot to kind of wake up to, and it can be a lot to wake up to at one time, like to see all of these different patterns, and how oppressive systems have abused so many people, and how, well, we see that now. We see that 1% of the people are living, in privilege, and then there's the 99% who are struggling, so all of that is the result of thousands of years of ranking systems and of privilege and of disconnect with the earth and with care, with how do we care, and you'd say the feminine is more about connecting and caring and feeling and embodying and being strong in my voice and my knowing and my instinct, my instinctive nature. And that has nothing to do with being in a male body or a female body. It has everything to do with who you are on the inside. So I think just in what you said, I think like when we start to wake up to all these different things, and part of the integration is this growing capacity, which is kind of feminine in a way, but to be kind to ourselves, to be forever compassionate, and that, we didn't consciously choose these things, nor did our parents or those parents, and nor did many men that were sent off to war choose to do that, and, to live with the
No.
consequences of that. So, so it's not a gender specific kind of thing. There's everybody gets harmed. So the more that we can see it that way and open and be kind and soft with patterns that have been kind of really deeply ingrained in the psychic, because you asked about the collective.
That's what I was gonna guide you next. Actually, this goes
Yeah.
seamlessly into the collective. So I'd love to, yeah. What experiences do you have of seeing collective trauma come out in plant? If we can stay with plant medicine as well, and weave the two together, where collective
Yeah.
trauma and plant medicine come together. I'd love to hear your experience and views on that.
Mhm. Yes. Well, I see this all the time with ayahuasca, because people open up on a deep psychic level, so they may see patterns that they've inherited in their bloodlines biologically from their parents, and then their parents, even in like that it's in the bloodline, and these psychic fields can open up for healing. And so sometimes we say that, the work that we do for our own healing, not only does it benefit us, the generation that we're living in, but the generations that have gone before us and those that will follow. So it's generational in that sense. And so sometimes in a ceremony, you may get a really clear vision of a particular experience and that happened either with yourself or with one of your relatives. And often too, people will find in their own heritage that there were medicine carriers, like in all of our cultures, there was a time where we were more connected to the earth and the land and to herbs and to ways of healing and being in life that included nature. And so many people find that they have that in their history and can start to find in your own land what the healing medicines are.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'm just reminded of my own. I know you spoke about it before. My own in one of your retreats. I've had a few experiences of the Holocaust, being a person in the Holocaust, or being someone in solitary confinement. I know in a non-plant medicine context, I had some experience of being a little boy. This one was the clearest, which we called John. He was like 7, who just got cast out of his home like a few hundred years ago. And, it's impossible to say what these are as such, but when they, you notice them happening and they have emotional weight to them, and you hear what other people are happening, it helps to see. So the mind is deeper and broader than we think.
Mm,
There's sort of a
yeah.
collective. There's no real difference between individual trauma and collective trauma. The fields kind of merge. How could you possibly distinguish what's yours and what's being given to you from
Mhm.
your society, the history of humanity? I mean, where would you draw that boundary?
Yeah, definitely. And also when you move into working with plant medicine, the more that you get really anchored in your own experience and the healing deepens, like you said, you make clear these surface patterns, and a person's mind gets clearer. They start to make different choices for themselves in their life. They may leave a marriage, may leave a job, may find that they've been spending their life in something that isn't satisfying, and all of that starts to shift. And this is part of the healing journey, anyways. Yeah, and finding out who you are and what you're here for. So that uncovers itself and uncovers itself and uncovers itself. And then in that, part of, well, in Hakoma, we call it completing a missed experience. And I want to give one experience for that.
Yeah,
Is,
please do.
yeah, is that mm, I had a very incomplete kind of relationship with my father. He was alcoholic. So alcoholism was really strong in my immediate family, just these addictive kind of patterns. And then, of course, there was abuse in that and lots of inadequate parenting, so to speak.
Yeah.
I learned from an early age how to kind of parent myself and others. There's no mistake that I ended up in the healing profession, yeah.
Yeah. Nope.
But I saw a lot of it, but I remember doing a lot of deep healing work with my father. And when I was, even before he died, I was the one who was asked to give his eulogy. And I remember I had to fly back to New York, and I just sobbed the whole time because I really never knew this person. And I thought, what am I to say about this person that I never knew? So I said something, I don't know what, but in the end, some of my uncles came up to me and said, Can you tell me about this AA program?" Because I must have talked about his alcoholism. But anyways, that was still kind of strong on me. And then I went to ayahuasca, and I had an entire ceremony with him in the ceremony with me. We had this conversation, and he let me know that he was okay. And I just felt really seen by him, and I could really see him in it, and it healed and shifted something in how I relate to my own inner masculine. There was like this bridge that never really happened, because often that's the role that the father can play for a young girl, young boy. It's a bridge, and to the inner masculine, how they relate to that, and then how do they relate to that in the world, to really feel like you're standing on the shoulders of something strong that has gone before you. You have some sense of confidence and direction. So that really changed, and I think that this is an important thing for many people, whether it be with both parents often, to kind of complete that piece so that you can really connect and feel strong in your inner feminine and your inner masculine and have that kind of integration, that marriage within it, which really creates, kind of a maturity that we don't see a lot of in the world. This, we can see a lot of women succeeding and men succeeding in a patriarchal, capitalistic kind of world, but to see this maturity of, sustainability and connection to others, not
Yeah.
above, not, not having to get there by stepping on something else.
Not just being the best is the only metric for success, but
Yeah.
taking other people with you.
Taking other people with you, or depriving somebody of something, like the earth, depriving the earth of something, for instance, so
Yeah.
that you can have whatever, another car, another house, another castle.
Yeah.
So I think, this is kind of the deeper work that happens. And I also want to say, in one of my videos, I interviewed this guy who told a story about where the plant ayahuasca comes from. So there's two plants, the vine, which is the ayahuasca, and there's the leafy green plant, which is chacruna, and that's what carries the DMT. And you need both.
Yeah.
Those two together are what we call ayahuasca. So it has, like everything has its mythology, right? A story. And there are many stories about how ayahuasca came about, many.
Yeah, because it seems an incredible, the process is quite complicated. It seems incredible that they could find these two vines and go, oh, well, let's do this with this one, and then we'll boil it for 24 hours, and then we'll try and drink it and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, because they had other medicines too, and there was such a connection to the earth and the land that these plants also spoke to them, like they would get
Yeah.
guidance. And this is part of the training. If you want to work with plants with Ernesto that I do, you diet different plants that don't have DMT, but they have they're teacher plants. They have healing qualities. And ingesting these plants over a period of time, you learn their elements. They speak to you. You come into a relation that you learn from them. And then it's almost like the more that you diet, you're carrying kind of this pharmaceutical, indigenous kind of, medicine within your body that can be tapped into when you're working with other people. And then, this is part of their tradition, is not by studying a book, about what I learned in the science lab, in the chemistry lab, but what did this plant teach me directly through being in relationship with it.
Yeah. That's cool. I just started reading a book called Thus Spoke the Plant by Monica Galliano. It's a scientist who goes on, starts change. She realizes a whole bunch of things. It ends up on dieta. Like, that's as far as I've got yet, but she's in the, in a hut in the jungle, starting to, and the plants are starting to, communicate things to her. And she's like, OMG, basically.
Yeah, I think I heard an
cool.
interview with her. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. So good. So I think I know who you're speaking about, and I plan to read that book. But so anyways, Jason told me this story about
Yeah.
this family living in the jungle, and the parents were getting older, and they had very specific instructions for their three children of how they wanted to be buried, and they wanted to be buried next to each other by this, in the forest, in the jungle. And so the father died first, and they buried him. And then the mother died later, and they went right to the same burial site in the forest and buried her. And then they said that what would come from this would be a medicine that could be used for healing, so whatever the whole story was. And then what grew out of that was the vine and the bush. And
there you go.
they were to use these medicines to help their people. So that's one story, and there's more to it than that, but that's all I can remember in this moment. So though, why I said that though, in that particular story, you see that there's this male and female, kind of together creating this plant. So infusing, and then the plant is infused with both. The totality of the human experience can then be addressed.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, I really love how you're saying the totality of the human experience. It's like a whole. What would be the word? It's a holistic approach in the sense that it includes many aspects. And at several points during what we've been talking about, the word intelligences has come up in my mind, like plant intelligences. I think that's a word Monica Galliani uses in her book. Right, not intelligence, but intelligences, like masculine, feminine, plant, different sentient intelligences sort of coming together. Because you're not. It's not just like a pill you swallow. It's it has much more to it than that. These various intelligences which teach you. I realized when I look back on like my mushroom experiences, I was being taught, I was being showed things. It wasn't just like, I'm going to do this and get something. That's kind of how I started approaching it. So I'd love if you could talk about the intelligences of it. And even the missed experience bit, for example, it's like, okay, I'll show you this. That's one approach. And there's got to be all these different approaches it could take, right, based on the person.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about plant medicine, they are very intelligent, and they're almost sneaky too. It's like you can diet plants for a long time, and the full intelligence of that plant may not it doesn't present itself all at once, right? Because you want to be able to integrate that intelligence. But in my work, you see the intelligence will show up. I sit, in my work in ayahuasca, I'll have a moment to sit in front of each person. And that's when I call upon, like this, it gets out of the way, is out of the way to be of service of the plants. And what is the intelligence of the plants bringing to this particular person? And each time that is very different, and it may come in an ikaro energetically, maybe something to pass on. But that's one way that the intelligence of the plant speaks and serves from a person who has been dieting plants.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm with you.
So in that ceremony, now we're not only working with ayahuasca, we have, there's an accessibility through the medicine person to these other plants and what they bring for healing. And when you're on your own, you diet in isolation. And like you said, Monica, I think her name was, so she's hearing, and also they're teaching through dreams. Dreams.
Yeah, it was a dream she mentioned. It was a non-psychoactive tree as well. It was just the bark. I can't remember the bark of a tree. I can't remember what tree it was. Just through the dreams.
Yeah. And that's that's how you're empowered to work with the plants. And there's something really sacred about that. Like, it's not something you can even really articulate or share, but it's wise, and that it becomes available when it's needed. And in like the person like myself, I can say, like, I know that didn't like come from me, from anything I learned prior in a book or from a training, but it came from the dieta. Yeah. So you can say like that.
Yeah, it's like these more intuitive and intrinsic intelligences rather than the conceptual planning kind of intelligence, which we're kind of a little bit unused to these other modes of intelligence. A lot of people they can feel a little uneasy, but it's such a rich place to explore.
Yes. Yeah, so if you want to kind of come to a wrapping of the ayahuasca, we might just say something about, like we did say, how it has DMT in it, so it has contraindications and things like that, and there's a preparation. But maybe we want to speak about the post-retreat, the integration. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In fact, we could maybe frame that in a slightly larger question, just a little bit larger, of just how you would work with these plants in general. Like how do you weave them into your healing journey? And that would include how do you integrate them?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So always after working with a plant, because they are so powerful and they're really, it takes you into a extraordinary state of, you kind of leave, in a sense, you're opened up to a whole nother world, the cosmos, in a different way. And so it's important to have time afterwards to really be able to be with yourself and to not have, like, kind of pass on the idea of trying to figure it out, like get like, okay, this means this and this means that. But it's almost like in meditation, we hear the word koan, like a
Mhm.
koan is something that works on you. You just like let it work on you. Like, so plants are like that. You just let them keep working on you because the experience doesn't end when the ceremony ends. Like, there's a good period of time. It can be 8 days, can be 15 days, where the plants are going to continue to work. You might get more insights. You might receive more through the dreams, more unpacking and more seeing, more time to just kind of land in yourself in a different way. Yeah, it's like really like, wow, just to kind of like savor the embodiment of more of yourself, because something's got moved out, cleared away, purged. And so take that time to land and
Mhm.
be, just be more of who you are. So presence, so having a practice of presence is always good. Journaling is good. Company, the kind of company that we keep, that's that community piece of the triangle. Like, that's where that's really important, because you could have people, you could maybe want to be excited, and why not, about your experience, but then perhaps share that with someone who might not be able to acknowledge or validate it or understand it. So it's, to choose wisely who you're going to share with, because if they, even someone listening to this, like you said, if they have no idea what we're talking about, it might sound really strange. And that would be the case with someone who doesn't have the experience. So you want
Yeah.
to take time and not enter into something super challenging, because you might feel really energized and like ready to, wow, I'm just going to, go do all those things I never did in life. But just go slow, just baby steps. It's like titrating. That's part of the titrating of trauma resolution, and of, in Hakoma, we talk about bite-sized pieces of nourishment, giving the system a chance to digest and assimilate. So we're not tossing it out, quickly. In our culture, we're so designed to be, like, this kind of automaticness kicks in to go fast. So just this kind of slowfully, which is soulfully, just slowing things down and savoring, taking the time to appreciate this really important change that has happened, this healing. And then you can, maybe you'll see other things in your healing journey that you might want to take up, and you might see things that you want to let go of. Like, maybe that isn't the path for you, but it's a path that you learned somewhere. But maybe something else becomes, maybe you're going to take up gardening, or, maybe other things that you would have never thought of seem more nourishing than for your soul, for your journey. In fact,
Yeah.
that level of discrimination, I think it's sharper. But I think it's good to always kind of have in mind this triangle, like, what is the medicine, like, what are you putting into your body and your mind, what are you taking in,
Mhm.
and what is the community of people you're surrounding yourself with, right? And who's the guide, like, where's the guide? Sometimes we need a guide, and it's important to have that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting, that one, because I've so many of the teachers, they're so useful and they're so helpful. And there's stages as well, as you come more into yourself. You Well, you're into your own authenticity, and the guides, you touch on them a little bit less. They're still there, and you still, I'm going
Yeah,
on retreat with you later this year. It's like amazing to have the guide, and then I see
Yeah,
where.
to have that guide as a mirror and as a time to check in, like I check in with my teachers all the time. I'm about to go back to Peru for 3 weeks to do some more dietas and to, stay on track and to check in and to rest and to have that deep learning. And I think to have a guide that can reflect, be a mirror and be able to really listen, not so much tell you what to do, but listen and bring out more of that true voice that is your own.
Yeah, I love that, the mirror. Well, going back to what you said at the start, to almost the mirror is there to help you see in the dark, right?
Yeah,
Again, to notice those little spots just behind your ear or whatever that you haven't,
yeah,
where you're acting out a little bit or whatever.
uh-huh. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. But we see more of that because I think like instinctively, intuitively, everyone yearns, I mean, this is my sense, to feel whole, to feel satiated, to feel a sense of belonging and safety, all of these things. So I think like when we kind of become conscious of that, well, otherwise we're doing it unconsciously and then not always in the best ways, right? And it becomes conscious and we start to, a path starts to get carved out and the unconscious starts to cooperate and it starts to place things on our path that like we go like, wow, like sometimes say, I don't know how I ended up here, but it's like we just met the right thing, just showed up at the right time. But all I think that's like the soul, if you want to call it that, or this alignment is happening to bring us home to who we are, to really this wholeness, this rightness, the goodness of who we are, to really line up with that. And then in that is this belonging to this connectivity, this web of life in a way that feels fruitful and beneficial.
yeah. I think I spot a way to weave this into another question that we have that works quite well. Actually. Yeah, I love what you're saying. Like that's been my experience also, even though it's just that as you do sort of as you turn towards these things you're afraid of, that seems to be the key. You have to turn towards it and welcome something in that you were previously pushing away, and then the things, to the extent that you're capable of doing that, the things will keep on unfolding in a way which helps you to do it more and more. But you were talking about the connection to the web of life and your own authenticity, and we were talking a bit about the beginning about this question about how what's the relationship between this sort of the feminine and plant medicine, because in spirituality there's a tendency, traditionally there has been, and it's changing, which is why I bring this question up, of a much more masculine, you could call it as well, patriarchal spirituality based a lot on transcendence
Mhm.
and like sort of dismissing the human experience. It's like, oh, don't worry about your being authentic. Like that's what you're talking about. Just like just netty that away. It's not me, or whatever.
Mm, mhm.
But actually there is something to be said for being an authentic human being. That's a vital part, and pursuing sort of desires, not cravings or like visceral attachments and things needing to be a certain way, but like an authentic desire to go and do this or that, which all seems to be part of the same thing: the humanness, the connectedness, that divine feminine idea, and and then see if we can weave plant medicine in there somehow as well. Yeah, that's barely a question, but I trust your ability to do something
Yeah,
useful with
I'm gonna I had to
that.
put a few notes down along the way. Wow, we're tracking. Let's track this one. Well, it started out like there was something in the beginning that I wanted to just be sure we didn't jump over in the beginning part of that, and it was about fear and this, this being able to turn toward something, right? Not bypassing. And I just want to say that again, the part of that to me, I've learned this the hard way perhaps, is to really have that container of safety and kindness because traumas can be re-triggered. And then is that's just too bad when that happens, right? And I've seen it happen a lot in spiritual circles just by a teacher saying something like, it's not real, or that's just your story kind of thing, where a person is bringing some really deep, heartfelt human experience forward and not being seen, heard, or met in that. Because always what is revealed is healed. So somebody is exposing or revealing something and it gets, you know, kind of severed, chopped off, suppressed. The trauma is getting re-triggered.
Yeah,
And
100%.
yeah, so that's like really important, and hopefully that's happening less and less. But that kind of abuse has happened with leaders who haven't really perhaps attended to their own shadow and are
Mm.
still serving from a trauma response, basically. So that was good. And then well, that kind of covers the neti. And I have a long experience myself with Advaita Vedanta tradition, so I'm very familiar with the teaching and how it can be interpreted. But when you really take the teaching all the way through, there may be a phase that we go through, which is nothing is real, having that sense of empty,
Mm.
void. There's really nothing here, nobody here. And there's truth to that, but
Yes.
it's partial. They're still okay. So then w- if that real when you get really emptied out, then everything is here. It's the same. And everything gets to be included. So that you could say is the part that reconnects. That's the work that reconnects. And that's been happening for a long time, but often, and this is my own little critique on it, there's been women teachers for quite some time, including being very inclusive in the human experience, emotions, but it hasn't been until even recently. And when a man teacher does it, then it's cool. Yeah. And it's sanctified, right? I mean, I've even heard some very popular, well respected teachers, doctors, trauma experts s- say some things that are even misogynistic and be like a little like shocked about that. But then they're the ones that now are talking about trauma. Now trauma can be included in spiritual circles as like something important. But the women have been serving in the basement, taking care of all the wounds for quite forever, and hasn't really been acknowledged. So we're like, all right, finally. But yeah, just like, my teacher, one of my primary teachers is Adyashanti, and he's been including the whole human experience for as long as I know him, and which was why I felt really, I attribute, I just think he's an amazing teacher because he does include the whole human experience. But there was someone who had an interview with him, and oh, I'm just going to say it, what the heck, and said, when I found out that your teacher was a woman, I couldn't believe it.
Really?
Yeah. And this is a really popular expert, that lots of people follow. And I just listened to this. They cut it out of the video. It actually got cut out later, so maybe somebody said something. But I was in there, and Adia handled it really well. And he was like, "Yeah, and she has 5 children." Like, of course, like, why not? Like, hello. So
No, you can only be enlightened if you have two or less. I think that's the rule I heard from somewhere, right?
well,
Otherwise, yeah.
or if you're a man,
Yeah.
I mean, in some people in some places unfortunately still believe that, and if the man said it, it's more true. So that's all changing. And maybe I went off on a tangent there, but I think it's important for us to kind of expose all of this. I mean, I've had people come to me before who in certain countries, when I was going around before plant medicine and just working with satsang and trauma resolution, and having serious medical conditions, and having a particular teacher say to them, your body isn't real.
Yeah. Yeah.
don't have to attend to that. And yeah,
Pretty
and then
wild.
and then the guy calling me aside because he also was told he was enlightened. So you're enlightened, so you don't attend to these. Your body's not real. And so we, he took me aside and we sat down. We had a good chat, and he went and got medical attention. Like, of course you need to do that. Doesn't mean nothing makes you inhuman. You have this human form to attend to no matter what. You have this human life, children, whatever it is, all of it. The more that we awaken to the truth of who we are and our instinctive nature and our inclusive nature and our connection to the earth, the more capable we are to just meet things as they are without all the interjections that may have been put into us through programming and conditioning, and without the projection of what we might put on that. For example, it's not real. It's for someone else to attend to. It's what the women do, or it's what the man does. Those
Yeah.
are projections that come out of, centuries of conditioning and programming, almost as if we all have this kind of virus that we can purge, and nobody's helped by that. So
Yeah,
you,
I hear
you
you.
want me to relate it to plant medicine? Well, plant medicine just kind of is the accelerated path when done well.
Right, yeah, done, good. Okay, yeah. So it sort of just highlights, it gives you it's a guide, an extra assistant on the ally on the path to seeing these
Yeah, and
various
keeping in mind,
bypasses and dynamics and staying true to what feels right.
yeah, yeah, and like what's so key about ayahuasca is, her intelligence. It's just brilliant. You can't hide anything. So, if there's shadow material, it will come to the surface. It will be seen. It will come. So there's kind of a courage, and I don't mean to say that in a way that needs to be frightening. It's not, especially when you're in the proper context, the setting and the safety, and with a good facilitator. You have everything you need. All of
Yeah,
that can work through in a really beautiful way, and then to be integrated, really beautiful. Yeah. But we did, so that was kind of the wrapping up maybe on ayahuasca. But do you want to speak about San Pedro for a little bit?
yeah. I think I was thinking there was a couple of things in my head. San Pedro was one of them. So if you still have a little bit of time,
Well,
uh,
excuse me. I would like to, because San Pedro is kind of. I also have a good deal of training in that. I like to give credit to. Well, first of all, when I didn't say this with ayahuasca, I want to give credit to the Quechua tradition that I trained with initially, and then the bulk of my training is with the Shipibos.
yeah.
And I have some very dear friends, mentors that are Shipibos, and I work with them extensively.
Is that where you're going? Yeah, next time, in the next few weeks.
Yeah, Jorge
Yeah.
Lopez, Sulmira, and Celestina, and there's many, but my primary teachers have been Jorge and Sulmira. But no, I'm not. I'm going to go to Ernesto Garcia, who's a Tabacodero, and I'm going to be doing dieta. So I'm on a course of training with him to continue to work with other plants that support all the other work. So I'll go there. I'm not going to be working with
Okay.
DMT this time. But I am going to bring a group eventually, because Jorge has a new center. I had helped him at one time to create a center in Iquitos, and I don't know whatever happened there, but he ended up selling his land. But now he's in a place closer to Pacopa, and I will bring a group again to him coming up sometime soon. But I've often brought many groups there, and which is part of how I really learned to be able, I was honored to be able to work side by side with him.
Amazing.
Yeah. So going to then San Pedro,
San Pedro.
yeah, I would have to give credit to my teacher and dear friend, colleague, Firewalker, who brought me into that work and did some really intensive training with him. He and I worked together facilitating retreats for a while, and he taught me the tradition of San Pedro. And it comes, his tradition is the Pacacuna tradition, which is the high mountains in Peru. And then he has this kind of craft, altar craft, and bringing in all the elements. It's very, some of it is very scientific. And as I've developed with it, it's kind of taken on its own flavor, which is different than his. So
Sure.
it's how that San Pedro works through me. And it's one of my favorite ceremonies on retreat, working with a group of people.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because we it's a collective healing that happens. And you had asked about that before. And it's a really beautiful ceremony because you could say how it works on us is it's very heart centered, very softening of the heart, very expansive. It's more etheric. It isn't as strong. People do have visions, but it's not like DMT, it's masculine. And so also it really opens up the aliveness of the plants, the rocks, and everything in nature becomes very alive. Ancestors may visit. It's really a very, very beautiful medicine. It just brings such a deep appreciation for Earth and for humanness as well. So in that particular ceremony, we do what we call, or I call, Olympia, healing. And a person comes to the center and they focus on something specific that they're letting go of or calling in to their life. And then we use this group dynamic to facilitate Olympia. And within that, not only does the person in the center, everybody benefits, not just the person in the center,
Yes.
because we see our shared human experience.
Yeah.
And it touches into an aspect of us or another person that may not have been touched yet. And we can, what I love about it the most, and because I hear this when people will come on to retreat sometimes for the first time, and one of the things people will say is they feel isolated or disconnected or don't know where I fit in or belong, stuck, things like that, burdened. And everything shifts in the ceremony around that because it brings us into belonging and connection because we see this common shared experience as humans personally and collectively, and great healing takes place. And these people who may have just met each other for the first time, suddenly, it's like you spent lifetimes together in that one ceremony. It's just like, it's so amazing. So, and sometimes, as you know, depending on how many people are there, the ceremony may go over a couple of days. We will have some sleep in between.
Yeah, that's been so much of my experience. It's amazing watching everybody. You spend a whole day. I think we spend maybe 14 hours in one day. You watch each person go up and share differently but the same. As you said, it's that short shared vulnerability. But just before this, I co-run a men's group with this one community with someone else, and we did a bit of work with someone, and helping them dive into some stuff. It's the same dynamic. It's this group of just seeing the shared vulnerability just opens something up in everybody, and everybody benefits from it, right? Intensified by the fact that it's men, which is quite rare to have, a group of only men, very open, watching all this stuff unfold in each other. So
yeah, of only men. Now I remember in Spain is my favorite location to go to for these retreats because we have this earth temple. And were you on that retreat twice?
Yeah. Once I was going to sign up, I couldn't go the second time.
Oh, okay.
I'm going this September. Everyone check out. I'll put the link in the description for Prajna's Spain retreat in September.
That is the highlight location, I think, because it can happen in this earth temple. And we're right there up on a mountain with these views in all directions and no distractions whatsoever. And here we are together for 10 days, I think it is. And it's absolutely amazing. It's my favorite retreat. And so much can happen in that period of time. what was I going to say? That wasn't that I was getting to something about that, but I can't remember. Well,
Olympia's healing collective. Everyone gets something from watching everyone
yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah. It's a lot to digest. I mean, it's a lot to digest for people. Oh, I know. Like you said, the men. I mean, remember one time I did have the majority were men on the particular retreat, and it was one of the most powerful retreats that I ever had the good fortune of facilitating to see. um I think it's strange that we think it's strange
Yeah,
that
yeah,
men can be vulnerable, because men are vulnerable and are beautiful and open. But it's always like I'm hoping that one day we won't say that, and we won't say, oh, it's so amazing to see the men be vulnerable. Like, you know, maybe they are, maybe they just are, and that we don't have to make such a big deal out of this, because that's part of patriarchy that has prevented, that has, that's the messaging that men get, is that I don't express my feeling, I don't show my softness, any weakness or anything like that, like vulnerability being considered a weakness, when it's really
yeah.
such beautiful strength.
Oh, it's necessary. I mean, life with vulnerability is 1,000 times better than trying to hold it all together and push it all down. My Christ. But I mean, I've started working with folks one on one, and I do notice that with men, it's a lot more difficult to get them into their body, and there's the numbness dissociation aspect seems to be more pronounced for them in general.
Hmm.
So it seems to be the sort of the training that they have received is
Yeah.
different in that respect. For
And it's shifting, and also women have that training just as much, as well. Some women get it stronger than men, and then there's some men that actually are trained to be caring and open. I have a brother like that, this beautiful brother,
Yeah,
Matt.
that's beautiful. Yeah, I don't want to overgeneralize. It's a bit of a
Yeah,
trend I've noticed. Certainly wouldn't
you're absolutely
take it with
right
a pinch
about
of salt.
that. Yeah, so that is that medicine, and it's again, it has requirements of diet, certain things to be able to get the most benefit from it. It's not so much of a maybe this is the most purges tears more than anything else, because you feel so much. It's just, oh, it's so amazing to feel that much and to feel unguarded. I was just thinking the other day, I had a group of people that I was with, and we're thinking about how, how people say that that's what they want, is to be vulnerable. Like when you ask, what is my intent? I want to be vulnerable. I want to be able to be unprotected. I want to be naked, give me the naked truth, right? And we want that. So then we have to ask the question, so why are we not giving that to ourselves? And that is the unpacking, the unfurling, so we get to see, so what's what am I covering? What am I covering? And is it supporting anymore? Do I need it? Never judging any part of it, but like, not nakedness as a biological, physical nakedness, but that crisp nakedness to just be who you are, and to know that that is enough, like totally enough. That's your gift, like we all have these gifts, but if have a pretense, we're covering over ourselves with whatever labeling, messaging, virus, identity, then we're not gonna find it. We're not gonna like land there, like just home, home, just to be who I am. And yeah, so that's the journey. Isn't that the journey?
Yeah, to be who you are.
Uh-huh.
But it's
Yeah.
just well, as it's I'm always reminded I've played 100 million times that song that you play by Nessie Gomez at the peak of some of the ceremonies, which is Long Way Home, because it does
Mhm.
also, that's the journey, but it is a long way home also. I can
Mhm.
feel like it at times, there are, because you can't just drop the protections. You need to, there's a
I
process.
Yes.
It needs to work through it at whatever pace the sort of system needs, and you can't dictate that.
Yeah. Such honoring. And I think these are the sensitivities that the training in this work bring, like this. You probably notice this in yourself, but I notice it increasingly, this kind of sensitivity, almost like to know what your dose is, your dose of the medicine and your dose of life. It's like that feeling and sensing, it's almost like, okay, you can lean in, I can lean in here, or go this way, or go that way, or okay, it's just time to do nothing, rest, right? But that's all about,
Absolutely.
it's all about the dose, isn't it? It's the dose, and that's how we come into balance. Like, what are we dosing ourselves with? Is it first of all, is it even the right medicine? And then, do I need more? Do I need less? And that's this fine tuning that I do with everyone that I work with, because we have to really listen. Because some people they can come to a strong medicine in the way that life is often approached, like, let's go full on, give it all to me, right? I want it all at once. And in that, there's the presence, if you're taking all, you can't stay present for that strength of a dose. And the key, like you asked before about a key, maybe the key is presence. It's like, can I find the dose that allows me to stay present with my experience so I can learn from it and I can integrate that, take it with me in my life.
Yeah, so you don't breach the container essentially with the intensity.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
to say that it can't be intense or that you can't have, who knows what the dose is, big or small, but it's got to be right. Yeah, as you say.
Yeah, and that might happen. It might be times where you really travel and you go somewhere else, but it's not to the extent, and this might happen too, but where you're so freaked out that you
Yeah, no, that's always pure. Yeah, there's a point.
jumping out of the experience, that's what we learn to do through trauma. We learn to jump out of the system. Yeah. So how do we come back? Oh, I love this conversation. I could speak lots, but we're probably starting to come to the end, huh? I have to
Yeah,
get
I
to
think.
my daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think this has been a very, very nourishing conversation. We've actually hit on all the points we wanted to, and then some.
Uh-huh.
At least in some way here or there. So
Yeah.
I'll just close this out by saying that Prajna's written a book.
I have
Like,
my new book is coming out. I have one book which is memoir, but my new book I'm so excited about. I've just
yeah. Do you want to
yeah.
say a minute or two on that? What's it called?
Well,
I don't even know the title.
I'm connecting it more to reclaiming the soul of mother. Like kind of my journey, the soul of mother. Call that mother here, Mother Earth. Like, what is mother? Mother goddess, and the different ways and the journey of my own life, how that disconnect happened and how that gets reclaimed and how this is collectively being reclaimed and needing to be this connection and seeing through my own experience with the birth. My first daughter was born at home and it was natural and it was just like, yeah, this is how we birth. We can do this. And that's what happens when a person births anything, whether it be a project. Like when we birth, we give birth to something. We're not imitating, or we're not using something to create something else, right? But we're naturally giving birth to something. So this can be for man or woman, anything. That there is this sense within. So when challenge comes, it's like a resiliency is there that I can do this. We got this. I got this, baby. You know, yeah, we got it. So then contrasting that to situations where there's an interruption, trauma is an interruption. Something is intercepted and the birthing doesn't get to complete itself. You don't get to go through that birth canal.
Yeah, you aren't able to manage it, to complete it. Yeah, you don't have the capacity. Yeah.
And then in the psychic, not so in the psychology and in the psychic, there is then that kind of, what do you want to call it? Well, there's a sense then inside that I can't do it. I failed. I'm not.
And also, and I better avoid and hide as well, just to make sure.
Yeah. So we all have that. So I really see one thing that hasn't been addressed is, this how we birth, and that is where we go back to the early sanctity of the birthing goddess, fertility goddess, of not just of all life, actually, and so that it kind of connects more to that through my own journey.
Yeah.
And I'm it's really a process for me to work through all these things and write about it. So
I bet.
Yeah.
Do you have a title yet?
Well, the current working title is Reclaiming the Soul of Mother.
Okay, and so that'll be out at a later date.
Yeah. Hopefully the pre-sale will be ready by October, but I have some good reviews already. Yeah. And but I just want to say also one more thing of how that's related, this whole thing of birthing, like when a person can complete a project, give birth to a creation or whatever it is, that resiliency and that I can is so important, because it also is what allows us to have this knowing and confidence in our own decisions and not to be so easily swayed by the public opinion, which is really important right now.
Yeah.
Where we have these institutions that are telling us, you have to do this, you have to do this, and not really backing it, but where people can really, not become victim to something that they haven't been able to investigate within themselves. Is this right for me? Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
Yeah. We need that now. We need our autonomy, our sovereignty.
Just be able to trust yourself.
Yeah.
Trust.
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful. Well, that book will be available soon. And there's Prajna, you have your first book. Is it Life After Grace? Beyond Grace?
The Edge of Grace.
The Edge of Grace, that was it. Which I have read. So yeah, really insightful read, and really it's amazing all the different challenges you have navigated in your life of many various incredible hues and colors and range. And I'll put a link to your website and your retreats in the video below, so people can learn about that. As for myself,
sign up for the newsletter, and then you can learn about any upcoming events. Of course, prajnaohara.com.
Rock and roll. And I also work with,
and what I wanted to say too for you is, so you're doing one-on-ones now, which I'm really excited to know you're doing that, because I know that you've come so far in your skill development and your research and your own personal growth. And it's the people who have done their own growth and inner work are the ones that can really be of most help to others. So I'm so glad to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah, I'm starting out where it's learning a lot for sure, but I'm grateful that it's going, and it's exciting work. And I know I've worked with some people today, for example, so it feels really coming along. They're getting it, they're grasping it, and things are changing in their lives, and it's beautiful to see that happen. The lady was telling me she was feeling feelings she hadn't felt in decades, of just like openness and being relaxed and so on and so forth, enjoying a walk, something as simple as that, but without that perma sense of doom, from that we inherit. So you can check out my stuff at drunkenbuddha.net is the site.
Drunkenbuddha.net.
Yeah, because it's also got a bit of an addiction focus a lot of the time. That was my route to all this stuff, was through addiction. So I remember it's about just as soon as I started getting into meditation, the name Drunken Buddha came to me. It's like, okay, you need to make a company or whatever called, Drunken Buddha. But I had no experience or skills or anything of the sort, so I had to wait a while till I had something to offer people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well,
now that you've sat down and you've got drunk with the Buddha, you can do that, right?
yeah, exactly. I'm
with a different medicine altogether. Yeah.
Well, I've heard people talk about dieting with alcohol, or using for spiritual purposes, but you have to be pretty careful, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks so much for this wonderful conversation, Prajna. It was really insightful and just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So
it's always fun to see you, and I look forward to seeing you on retreat.